Biographical Bytes from Bala number 53 from mid-February 2026. Walter Livingston, Jr., 1922-2011. Building with a Black Aesthetic. Welcome to Biographical Bytes from Bala, a mid-monthly podcast about people buried at Laurel Hill West Cemetery in Bala, Kidwood, Pennsylvania. I am Joe Lex, retired professor of emergency medicine from Temple University. You can reach me at jrlexjr1947@gmail.com. All Bones Considered Laurel Hill Stories and Biographical Bytes from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories were recently chosen by FeedSpot as Best Philadelphia History Podcast. Walter Livingston, Jr. was a pioneering black architect and urban planner in Philadelphia who contributed to major urban renewal projects and public housing while serving on redevelopment boards and co-founding an architectural firm. Walter's crowning achievement was the Zion Baptist Church on North Broad Street, home base for the legendary Lion of Zion, the Reverend Leon Sullivan. Livingston remained active in architecture and community service until late in life and was honored as a Fellow of the American Institute of Architects, leaving a lasting impact on Philadelphia's built environment. The podcast today starts with a general survey of architecture and some of its varying ethnic influences. Biographical Bytes from Bala number 53 from mid-February 2026. Walter Livingston, Jr., Building with a Black Aesthetic. In the United States, only 2% of the 113,000 architects identify as black, despite black people making up more than 13% of the population. This low level of representation results from a mix of cultural, economic, and systemic factors, including limited awareness of architecture as a career. For many young black individuals, exposure to architects is rare. Like many children, their role models come from their immediate surroundings, which may draw black children towards fields more like music or sports or fashion. Limited school funding further restricts access to creative subjects like art, music, technology, and hands-on classes that can nurture interests in careers like architecture. Some of the roots of this underrepresentation trace back to times like the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s. It's a period now recognized as being rich in black cultural achievement. And while that era spurred growth in many intellectual and artistic domains, architecture did not benefit as much. Black architects of the time tended to focus on matching the achievements of their white peers rather than promoting a distinct black architectural identity, which contributed to ongoing marginal growth. Additionally, many black professionals chose careers with clear social impact, like teaching, nursing, social work, to give back to their communities. Architecture does not always offer immediate visible value, and therefore it attracts fewer black candidates. Architecture plays a crucial role in shaping human culture. It preserves history and influences how people interact with their world. Yet few black architects have had the chance to make a widespread impact, and their legacies are often known only within the field. Contemporary architecture as a field and career has long been shaped by frameworks that favor white-centric ways of thinking and styles. But this influence goes beyond simple design choices. It's woven into how architectural ideas are developed, taught, and practiced. The main stories and key histories of the discipline tend to highlight European and settler colonial perspectives, which have often pushed aside other ways of imagining spaces, especially those connected to Black experiences. The link between whiteness and architecture is subtle and often overlooked because both are deeply embedded in cultural and social norms. Whiteness as a social construct can be invisible to those who benefit from it, making its influence on architectural spaces less obvious. Since architecture is usually discussed in terms of aesthetics and function rather than social power or identity, the connection between whiteness and the built environment remains obscured. Architecture began to be recognized as a distinct profession, separate from artisanal building crafts during the 19th century. The establishment of formal architectural education, professional organizations such as the Royal Institute of British Architects, RIBA, founded in 1834, and the introduction of licensing requirements helped solidify architecture as a recognized profession rather than solely an artisanal skill. The professionalization process spread globally throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. In other words, architecture was becoming a recognized profession during the same period that European colonial empires were expanding. Colonial empires used architecture deliberately as a means of control, designing buildings and city layouts to enforce order, discipline, and visibility that fit their colonial agenda. Public spaces, urban planning, and infrastructure projects were crafted to showcase the colonizers' perceived superiority, creating spatial divisions that echoed racial inequalities. And in this system, Black communities were pushed to the margins, either erased from view or confined to areas designated for labor, monitoring, and control. Architecture often marginalizes non-white people, both openly and subtly. Formal systems such as education, professional standards, and aesthetics typically promote Eurocentric ideas, treating non-Western and Black spatial traditions as outsiders. This exclusion gets worse due to barriers like limited access to education, licensing, and career opportunities, disproportionately affecting Black communities. Consequently, architecture's colonial history continues, with institutional practices that neglect or downplay Black perspectives and keep them on the edges of architectural discussions and developments. The continued influence of white-centric and colonial frameworks in architecture significantly affects current professional practices and educational approaches. Architectural curricula have been slow to incorporate Black and decolonial perspectives, which have contributed to ongoing challenges regarding substantive inclusion and representation within the discipline. In particular, the built environment, especially in post-colonial and settler colonial contexts, frequently upholds spatial inequalities rooted in historical exclusionary processes. These persistent structures not only determine the configuration of physical spaces, but also impact opportunities for Black presence, expression, and agency in the architectural field. I asked Copilot, that's Microsoft's LLM AI program, how American architecture would look today if Asian and African influences were allowed in an equal mix with European tradition. And here's what it told me. It makes it sound like a place I would very much like to live. If contemporary American architecture had been shaped more by African and Asian influences than by European ones, the built environment would very likely look different today. Buildings might feature more organic forms, intricate patterns, and a stronger connection to nature, reflecting elements found in traditional African and Asian architecture. For example, we might see widespread use of natural ventilation, courtyards, shaded walkways inspired by African designs, as well as modular layouts, sliding partitions, and flexible spaces influenced by Japanese and Chinese architecture. Materials would also differ, with more emphasis on locally sourced and sustainable resources like bamboo, adobe, rammed earth, rather than the brick, stone, and steel typical of European traditions. Roof lines could be more varied with sweeping curves or dramatic overhangs, and there would likely be richer use of color, geometric motifs, and symbolic ornamentation. Overall, American cities and neighborhoods would present a more diverse and regionally adapted aesthetic, prioritizing harmony with the environment and communal living spaces over the symmetry and monumentality characteristic of European-inspired architecture. Despite challenges faced by all non-whites who work in a white majority, numerous black architects have made impressive contributions by designing a variety of spaces, including museums, churches, homes, businesses, and many of them located in the black communities. However, recognizing their work can be difficult for the general public since most buildings blend into the urban landscape without clear markers of their creators. An architectural footprint that identifies the creator is a rare thing. Some architects have a style immediately recognizable. Frank Furness, Gaudi, Frank Gehry. Among African American architects, there's David Adjaye. Think about the African American Museum, the Smithsonian African American Museum in Washington, D.C. In Philadelphia, any mention of a black architect immediately leads to the brilliant Julian Abele. It's spelled A-B-E-L-E, pronounced Abel. He was chief designer for the firm of Horace Trumbauer. Locally, you see his work all over the place. He's at the library, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I didn't even have a chance to change PMA to the new indication because it was announced yesterday that they're going to leave it PMA the way it's been for the last 80 years. Why change a good thing? Anyway, a lot of people call the Rocky steps in front of the PMA, they call them the Abele steps. Abele's work is precise and stunning. His blueprints are staggering in their accuracy, in their minutiae. In 1937, English novelist Aldous Huxley was traveling by automobile through North Carolina during a particularly warm summer. He described the region as, quote, a pleasant but unexciting land, end quote, and he unexpectedly encountered a remarkable city of great Gothic stone that emerged from the pine forest. Impressed, Huxley referred to this academic city with its prominent cathedral tower and extensive quadrangles as, quote, genuinely beautiful. And he noted that it was the most successful essay in Neo-Gothic that I know. This distinguished campus was Duke University, though Huxley, like many visitors, was unaware that its striking design was crafted by the architectural firm Horace Trumbauer of Philadelphia, with Julian F. Abele, an African-American, serving as chief designer. Julian Francis Abele, 1881-1950, was born into a distinguished African-American family in Philadelphia, and he benefited from his father's position at the U.S. Treasury Customs House. This allowed him to receive an excellent education. He completed his studies at Philadelphia's Institute for Colored Youth, ICE, which later became Cheney University. I've talked about them extensively in prior podcasts. That he completed his studies there in 1897. His aunt, Julia Jones, was an art instructor at this renowned Quaker school, and she guided him toward architecture through her drawing classes. So in 1898, the next year, he earned a certificate in architectural design from the Pennsylvania Museum and School of Industrial Arts. This, of course, later became the late lamented University of the Arts. By 1902, Abel graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's School of Architecture. 1903, he achieved a certificate of completion in architectural design from the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. He was the first African American to earn such credentials from each of these last three institutions. Despite this extraordinary accomplishment, Abel later reflected, "I lived in the shadows." He was referencing the barriers imposed by societal norms and personal experiences that shaped his career for many years. Among the most renowned public buildings by the Trumbauer firm are the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Philadelphia Free Library, and Harvard University's Widener Library. Many private projects in Washington, D.C. currently serve as ambassadorial residences. Some former estates, like those at Monmouth University in New Jersey, have found new life as college campuses. Sadly, White Marsh Hall, the opulent 147-room estate that he built for Eva and Edward Stotesbury in Chestnut Hill, no longer stands. But Peter Errol Brown Widener's Linwood Hall in Elkins Park is presently undergoing rescue and renovation as an event space. Widener is, of course, on level 2 of Millionaires Row at Laurel Hill East. Meanwhile, the Elms, a mansion constructed for Edward Julius Berwind, Laurel Hill West, Franconia section. That was in 1901, before Abel joined the practice, is now available for tours on Newport's famous Millionaires Row, thanks to the Preservation Society of Newport County. If you're a taphophile, Trumbauer's work can best be seen in the Widener Mausoleum at Laurel Hill East and the Eisenlohr and Berwind Mausoleums at Laurel Hill West. Plus, of course, Trumbauer himself is buried at Laurel Hill West in the Franconia section. I talked about him in All Bones Considered Laurel Hill Stories number 5 several years ago. Today, the Duke University campus stands as the firm's largest and arguably most visited project. Records from the Duke University archives show that the university officials recognized Abel as the chief designer of the campus, although his African-American heritage was apparently not widely known at the time. For instance, in a letter dated June 30th, 1927, Frank C. Brown, an English professor, university comptroller, and liaison between the university and the Philadelphia firm, specifically mentioned Abel by name when he wrote to Horace Trumbauer. Demonstrating the technical nature of their communication, Brown requests that Trumbauer discuss with Abel his concern about having 52-inch centers for the stacks in the library of the Women's College, now called the East Campus. Duke did not graduate its first black students until 40 years later, in 1967. Most people at Duke likely did not hear about Julian Abele until 1974, when Alice Phillips published a pamphlet titled Spire and Spirit, Reflections on Inspiration and People in the Duke University Chapel. In her account of serving as the chapel hostess, Phillips wrote a chapter called Le Noir, where she described discovering Abel's involvement in designing the chapel. However, this pamphlet did not reach a wide audience. Duke's history dates to 1838. That's the year featured on its official seal. The institution has operated continuously since the 1830s, though it has undergone several name changes and a major relocation. In 1892, it was known as Trinity College, and it moved from Randolph County to Durham, North Carolina, thanks to financial backing from Durham tobacco businessman Washington Duke. Later, on December 29, 1924, the Board of Trustees changed the school's name to Duke University to recognize the significant contributions of the Duke family, especially James B. Duke, whose donations paved the way for the college to become a university. The Abele family's connection to Duke further became public knowledge in an ironic but dramatic fashion in April 1987. Duke students were protesting the university's investment in South Africa by building a shanty town on the main quad. One letter to the editor of the campus newspaper complained that the ugliness of the crude shelters, quotes, violates our rights as students to a beautiful campus, end quote. A student named Susan Cook responded. She noted that she, too, enjoyed being a student at the beautiful campus, but upon reflection, the writer should acknowledge that joy over a beautiful campus was, quote, ridiculously superficial compared to the ugliness and brutality of racism, end quote. She then revealed that the designer of the Duke campus was African American and her great-granduncle. She stated that she did not think Julian Abele would object to the shanties amid the Gothic splendor, because he had been a victim of South African-like apartheid in his own country. Abele, she reported, had not even traveled to view the campus he had designed because of his revulsion at the Jim Crow segregation prevalent in the South in his lifetime. Susan Cook's revelation and identity caused considerable discussion on campus, resulting in what some people eventually called the cult of Abele. More recent evidence indicates that Abele did pay a visit to the campus during its construction, but he was disgusted when he was refused a room at a local hotel where his white companion was gladly welcomed. So he never saw the finished product and he never went back south again. Duke University Chapel stands as a notable example of collegiate Gothic architecture and is considered among the South's most beautiful buildings. I've talked before about collegiate Gothic with its Philadelphia origins. Now, calling this structure a chapel might not do justice to its impressive size. It comfortably accommodates about 1,800 people. Architectural highlights, ribbed vaults, expansive cloisters, pointed arches, a tower that soars to 210 feet. This remarkable edifice could be objectively described as a cathedral reminiscent of England's Canterbury Cathedral. Despite the Duke family's Methodist roots, both Duke Chapel and the university are officially non-denominational, and its architect, Julian Abele, never set foot in the building. When Julian Abele died in 1950, the Philadelphia Inquirer gave him a 3-paragraph obituary. At the time, he lived at 1515 South Christian Street. He was 68 years old. He was buried at Eden Cemetery. In 1995, he was featured along with other black architects in a major exhibit at the African American Museum in Philadelphia. Another of the black architects honored that day was Walter Livingston, Jr. Walter Raleigh Livingston, Jr. came from a family of achievers. His father, Walter R. Livingston, was feted in an August 1924 article in the Philadelphia Tribune with the headline, "Passes Pennsylvania Bar Examination." Livingston Sr. had studied law at Howard University before he transferred to Temple. When he died in 1974, his obituary told of his 42 years as a mechanical engineer at Frankfurt Arsenal, in addition to being a practicing lawyer who was inducted into the 50-year Club for Lawyers shortly before his death. Walter's son, Walter R. Livingston, Jr., grew up in North Philadelphia, and he graduated from the prestigious Central High School. He earned a bachelor's degree in education in 1943 from Cheney University, where 3 of his children and his wife later earned degrees. During World War II, he served in the Army Corps of Engineers in Europe, and he saw action during the Battle of the Bulge. After discharge, he attended Penn on the GI Bill. Christmas Day, 1951, he met Marjorie V. Catchie, C-A-C-H-I-E. 6 days later, he proposed marriage on New Year's Eve, and they married 3 months after that. The couple raised 6 children in West Philadelphia. Mr. Livingston was a Democratic committeeman in the 46th Ward. He was committed to his neighborhood and invested in 4 houses on Locust Street, where he and his wife and 3 of their children lived, his daughter said, forming more or less a family complex. He loved taking family photographs. Now, in addition to his bachelor's degree in architecture, Walter earned a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Pennsylvania. The early part of his career was taken up by several posts at the Philadelphia Redevelopment Authority, the RDA. In 1949, he became the first African American on the technical staff of the authority, initially serving as an administrative assistant, but working his way up to site planner in 1951. In 1958, Livingston left the staff of the RDA when he was appointed by Mayor Richardson Dilworth to the authority's board of directors, of which he eventually became vice chair. He served from 1958 to 1972. It was in this capacity that Livingston played an influential role in some of the city's largest public housing and urban renewal projects of the 1960s. This includes the completion of Independence Mall. Independence Mall is the 3 square blocks directly north of Independence Hall. Independence Hall National Park, that's an area considered by many to be the most historic square mile in America, is 55 acres between Chestnut and Walnut, 2nd and 6th. Independence Hall, Franklin Court, the Second Bank of the United States, Washington Square, numerous other historic sites. The first proposal for an Independence Hall Park had been in 1915. Motivated by many desires to create a fitting setting for Independence Hall, lessen the fire hazard, reduce congestion, beautify the entire district. It was 2 architects, Albert Kelsey and David Knickerbocker Boyd, who proposed clearing the half block between Chestnut Street and Ludlow Street in front of Independence Hall. The idea for a park gained momentum in the 1920s and 30s, with patriotic sentiment accompanying the American sesquicentennial in 1926. It was the start of World War II that led to a heightened sense of patriotism and urgency toward the protection of these national monuments. 1948, Congress passed Public Law 795, H.R. 5053, authorizing the creation of Independence National Historic Park, and it was formally established on July 4th, 1956. In 1973, the Pennsylvania legislature voted to transfer the 3 blocks that compose Independence Mall to the federal government. Independence Hall was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site on October 24, 1979. Now, at the same time that Livingston joined the board of the RDA, he entered private practice as an architect for the first time, joining the Center City, Philadelphia firm of Eschbach, Pullinger, Stevens, and Bruder. In 1960, Livingston earned his registration as an architect, and in 1961, he left his employer, ventured out on his own to create a new firm with architect Marvin D. Seward, known as Seward and Livingston. In 1969, Seward Livingston rejoined Eschbach, Pullinger, Stevens, and Bruder. Walter was in constant demand to serve on various boards and committees. He became deeply involved in Berrien Federal Savings Bank, the Youth Study Center, Stapley Hall in Germantown, the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and the American Red Cross of southeastern Pennsylvania. He was a chairman of the board of the Philadelphia Tribune, and he was a past president of the Urban League, which presented him with the Whitney M. Young Heritage Award for community involvement in 1994. And he received the Silver Beaver and Silver Antelope Awards for his service on the Cradle of Liberty Council, Boy Scouts of America. Mr. Livingston was a founder and charter member of the University Swim Club, which opened in 1964 as the first private integrated swim club in the city. I talked about the Nile Swim Club, initially an all-black organization, back in Biographical Bytes from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories number 17, when I told you about Julia and Raphael Cole. Walter was a Mason and a member of the Philadelphia chapter of Rotary International. And in 1973, Livingston was one of the two finalists being considered for the position of executive director of the City Planning Commission. He did not get that assignment, though. The commission that most people remember Walter Livingston Jr. for is the Zion Baptist Church on North Broad Street. Its pastor was the legendary Reverend Leon Sullivan. In 1950, Leon and Grace Sullivan moved to Philadelphia, and Leon took on the role of pastor at the Zion Baptist Church. There, he famously became known as the Lion of Zion. And in 1955, he moved the church from 13th and Mellon to the northwest corner of Broad and Venango into the former St. Paul's Reformed Episcopal Church. In 1964, Sullivan founded Opportunities Industrialization Centers of America, the OIC, in the abandoned jailhouse in North Philadelphia. This program took individuals with little hope and few prospects, offered them job training and instruction in life skills, and then helped place them into jobs. The movement quickly spread around the nation. With 60 affiliated programs in 30 states and the District of Columbia, OIC grew into a movement which has served over 2 million disadvantaged and underskilled people. Another of the Reverend Sullivan's first projects was Project Plaza on North Broad Street. Walter Livingston was his architect. Today, the site has a blue historic marker. Established by Reverend Leon Sullivan in 1968, this shopping center was the first of its type of venture developed, owned, and managed by African Americans. It was funded by investors from Sullivan's congregation at the nearby Zion Baptist Church. Visited by a number of presidents and presidential candidates, this location was prominent on Philadelphia political scene. It sparked a number of similar projects across the U.S., and it remains a successful enterprise in Center City and a symbol of economic empowerment and self-sufficiency. I would take issue with that it's in Center City. I consider Center City to be the old boundaries of the city. So once you're past Spring Garden to the north, you're no longer in Center City, in my mind anyway. Friday the 13th, November 1970, front page, Philadelphia Inquirer. Headline, 6-alarm fire hits church headed by Dr. Sullivan. 59 children led to safety. The fire in the 88-year-old building had started in the basement. No parishioners were injured, but 5 firefighters were, 2 seriously. Reverend Sullivan vowed that his church would rise from the ashes, and he hired Walter Livingston Jr. to design his new house of worship. In 1973, Inquirer columnist Asel Moore expressed his wonder at the new edifice that had risen on the northwest corner of Broad and Venango, a perfect location since the Seneca-derived word Venango signifies meeting place or place of the spirits. After he described the blue sunlight that reflects through the clerestory panels in the main auditorium, he then talks about the outside, which to his eye and to mine does show some African influences. The exterior gives the feeling of grandeur, with its large, bright blue and smaller plexiglass panels pyramiding to a zenith from a base of beige bricks. Clerestory, by the way, is a high section of a wall with windows placed above eye level. Another notable feature of the church is a pulpit that actually has windows that look out onto the streets of North Philadelphia. Now, financially astute, Zion settled its mortgage in record time. They paid off this church in 10 years. Reverend Sullivan retired from the Zion pulpit in 1988 and focused his remaining years on international humanitarian efforts throughout Africa. The grand structure is now more than half a century old. With its glass entrance and vaulted roof, it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The application notes, quote, Zion Baptist Church is also significant under Criterion C in the area of architecture as a major ecclesiastical work in the modern style by Philadelphia's most prominent black architect of the post-war period, Walter R. Livingston, Jr., 1922-2011. Zion Baptist is one of the first churches to receive a grant from the Conserving Black Modernism Partnership between the Getty Foundation and the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. This is to develop a preservation plan. It was actually my privilege to meet Dr. Leon Sullivan once when he paid a visit to Thomas Jefferson Hospital Emergency Department as a patient in the late 1980s. I'd only been in town for a couple of years, but I'd certainly been here long enough to know who Leon Sullivan was. What I will never forget from that day was, first of all, his humility. He just called himself a country preacher. The other thing that I will always remember is the way that every black employee gazed at him with so much love and respect and spoke to him with such reverence. Reverend Leon Sullivan died in April of 2001. He's interred in Arizona. His list of awards includes the Presidential Medal of Freedom and is quite lengthy and includes more than 50 honorary degrees. In 2026, as I write this, international travelers to Philadelphia are welcomed to the United States at the Reverend Dr. Leon H. Sullivan International Arrivals Hall in Terminal A of Philadelphia National Airport. Walter Livingston's activities weren't just confined to his building business. One of the organizations he supported was the Urban League. He served as its president. Known today as the National Urban League, the Committee on Urban Conditions Among Negroes was founded in New York City in 1910. It merged with the Committee for the Improvement of Industrial Conditions Among Negroes in New York and the National League for the Protection of Colored Women. Today, the National Urban League has 92 affiliates serving 300 communities in 37 states and the District of Columbia, providing direct services that impact and improve the lives of more than 2 million people nationwide. Walter Livingston Jr. also served for several years as a board member of the Philadelphia Tribune, a tri-weekly publication that was established in 1883. It has played a significant role within the black community. In 1974, when he was involved, its circulation was approximately 120,000. It is the oldest continuously operating black-operated and owned newspaper in the United States. It remains active today with headquarters on South 16th Street. Walter Raleigh Livingston Jr., Philadelphia's premier post-World War II black architect, died at his home from complications of a stroke in 2011. He was 89 years old. His obituary noted that he'd stopped going to the office when he was 86, but he never officially retired. He was a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. He left behind his widow, 3 daughters, 2 sons, 12 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. A son, Joseph, had died 2 years before him. Livingston is interred in the Mausoleum of Peace, just inside the gate from Belmont and up on the hill near the chapel. Marjorie joined him in 2018. All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories, and Biographical Bytes from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories, were conceived, researched, written, narrated, and produced by me, Joe Lex, retired professor of emergency medicine from Temple University. You can email me, jrlexjr1947@gmail.com. Our March podcasts are going to celebrate Women's History Month. In All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 84, I'm going to tell you about another architect, believe it or not, Emily Elizabeth Holman, a successful architect who masked her gender by designing as E.E. Holman. Matilda Tilly Forney, a pioneering newspaper reporter. Claire Wofford, wife of U.S. Senator Harris Wofford, an activist in her own right. And Florence Kawanova, a dance instructor who taught Grace Kelly and Zelda Fitzgerald, among others. Mid-March, I'm going to return for a 5th visit to the Drinker Bow Plot at Laurel Hill West. When I talked about Henry Sanwith Drinker in All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 41, I mentioned that eventually I would do a podcast about his wife Sophie, the woman who still made him feel weak in the knees when he would accidentally encounter her in Center City, even in the many years after their marriage. Sophie was a controversial scholar on music created and performed by women, and the Sophie Drinker Institute in Bremen, Germany, was established in her honor. That's coming up on March 15th. Laurel Hill East and Laurel Hill West are open 365 days a year, from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. now. That's going to change as the sun stays out a little longer. Eventually we'll be open until 7 in the evening. No entrance fee. There's never a fee just to come in and look around, although we do charge for the tours. There is parking at East and West. There's a lot more free parking at West than there is at East. East, there's a few slots across the street and a few slots on the grounds. But public transportation is pretty good. Public transportation to West is not as bad as may have led you to believe. You can go to the Wissahickon Transfer Center and cross the Schuylkill River on the Pencoid. We actually know there was a photo of the Pencoid pedestrian bridge that came up my feed. It is packed with snow. Nobody's crossing the Pencoid pedestrian bridge right now. But when the snow's not there, that's the way you got to cross the river. Then you go up the road and come in the cemetery from the rear, or you can take one of the buses that goes down City Avenue, get off at Belmont, and then walk a half a mile or so to the back pedestrian entrance to Laurel Hill West. The book is out, All Bones Considered, 52 Laurel Hill Women. If you're a long-time listener, you probably know all of these women. They're women that I've talked about in the past on the podcast, but they struck me as interesting enough to deserve their own book. So that's what I did. All profits from the book go to the cemetery, by the way. You can buy it from the cemetery gift shop. If you're a member of the Friends of Laurel Hill, you get a discount by buying it through the gift shop, or you can buy it from Amazon.com. Stick around for the bibliography coming up. And in the meantime, maybe I'll see you on a tour at the cemetery. I'm not going to tell you the tours that are coming up on the Biographical Bytes from Bala. I will go through them with All Bones Considered, but this one I make a little more concise. Stick around, though, if you want to hear the bibliography. Lots and lots of newspaper articles about Walter Livingston and, of course, about Dr. Leon Sullivan and Julian Abele. A few, actually, the Abele material came more from reference articles. For instance, The Blacks Who First Entered the World of White Higher Education by Robert Bruce Slater. That's from the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, number 4, summer of 1994, pages 47 to 56. The Discovery of an Architect, Duke University and Julian F. Abele by William E. King. That's from Southern Cultures, volume 15, number 1, spring of 2009, pages 6 to 21, published by University of North Carolina Press. The Lion of Zion, Leon H. Sullivan, and the Pursuit of Social and Economic Justice. Introduction. Author is V.P. Franklin from the Journal of African American History, Volume 96, Number 1. Winter 2011, pages 39 to 43. Then there's a chapter from a book. The chapter title is Memories. The book title is Building Black, and the subtitle is Toward Anti-Racist Architecture. This is a 2022 publication by Punctum Books. The author is Elliot C. Mason, pages 17 through 24. Other than that, it was lots and lots of newspaper articles about the fire at the church. I didn't put it down, but I did look at the National Historic Register of Historic Places for information. But I forgot to put that down as a reference. Okay, that's it for February. Thank you for listening. Buy the book, All Bones Considered, 52 Laurel Hill Women. Listen to the podcast from earlier in the month about 4 Black champions, and come back next month for more. I'm Joe Lex. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay well, stay above ground.